Chapter 22. That evening, after Kemi and Miriam had gone to sleep, Teo went to his study to read. He started with what lay on his desk, some academic journals and Ngugi's Petals of Blood, but soon he had put down his shading and was looking in his drawer for something else. The object was a tattered diary, which had found its way to Teo in 1979 via his father's old address in Iboden. The address on the inside cover was the only bit of writing still clearly legible in Vanessa's old diary, yet he kept these torn and yellowing pages and would look at them from time to time. There was nothing new to read, and usually he would end up dreaming about what might have been. What might have been had she stayed with him in Nigeria, or had he gone back to Oxford or joined her later in Dakar. And then a door creaked, followed by the sound of flip-flops slapping gently against the concrete floor. It was Kemi on her way to the toilet. "Vanessa," Teo whispered, turning back to the journal and thinking that had it not been for his mistake, had they known that the Nancy would not hold ... but what was the use of wishing now? It was all in there. Past. Now Vanessa was a well-known writer and one of Africa's most loved journalists. So much for him believing she would never fit into West Africa. Of course she did. He reached now for the photograph that sat on his desk and used his sleeve to dust it off. What if he had married Vanessa regardless? But he couldn't have left Miriam when she was pregnant, and, besides, his whole family loved Miriam, which made it even harder. Miriam had looked after father when he had his stroke, and because Baba always attributed his speedy recovery to her nursing, she became an honorable member of the Ajayi family even before HC married her. What had happened with Miriam was done on a whim, in a moment of weakness. She was the one who had come to him after Baba's operation, comforting him when nobody else thought to do so. He had been touched and felt that he owed her something, so he had taken her out for a drink and met with her a few more times in the weeks that followed. And then ... even though he hadn't meant to and hadn't even really wanted to, he slept with her. She was beautiful and religious, and it just sort of happened, despite the religion, or may be because of the religion, which made it seem all the more unlikely. And then she fell pregnant and he felt he had no choice, yet had he known? "What are you doing, Daddy?" Kemi asked, causing Teo to jump and knock. She stood in her Snoopy night dress, which read, "Love is the whole world." Her eyes were squinting beneath the glare of the bare yellow light bulb dangling. "Just working, baby," he answered, watching as she started rubbing one foot from the ceiling rapidly against the inside of her standing leg. He reached. She dropped the foot and wandered closer to his desk, yawning quickly for Ngugi's novel, and placed it on top of the journal. "You work too much, Daddy." Kearney smiled, picking up the wedding graph. She removed the cork backing and straightened the print before pressing. "There." She smiled again, propping it back on his desk. "And you should be sleeping, my baby." "But one can't sleep, Daddy. I'm too excited about their holidays." "One thinking about it. All the more reason to try. That way time will go faster. Before you know it, we'll be off to Lagos." "Okay," she said, walking towards the door, "but Daddy," she stopped and turned back, "will you tell me a story of when you were a child? Just one." He smiled, knowing already the one she wanted to hear. "Come then, baby. Come and sit on my lap and I'll tell you a story." He pushed his chair away from the desk and she hopped onto his knee. In 1951, there was a little boy. "Was it you, Daddy? Yes, he smiled. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Yes, she nodded. I'll start again then. Once upon a time, in 1951 there was a little boy called Omoteo, who was visiting Lagos for the very first time. The boy came with his father from Ibadan. And this was their second day in Lagos. Kemi smiled and occasionally giggled as he told her of how he had been forced to sit patiently in church waiting for the service to finish before he could run outside and see the fine ocean liner called the Oriole. And who else gets impatient? Teo smiled, tickling Kemi's tummy. Stop it, Daddy. Kemi shouted. Tell me the story. SHH. You'll wake your mum. But it was too late. You too. Miriam exclaimed. She stood by the door shaking her head. Look, we've woken Mummy now. Miriam smiled and walked to where Kemi sat on Teo's lap. She rubbed his eyes sleepily. Just finish your story and come to bed, both of you, she said, kissing them one after the other, on the forehead. Come, Teo called, pulling her by the waist a little closer. There's room. The armchair for you too, he said, tapping the side of her large tummy. Come to bed, Miriam smiled, massaging the back of his neck. Teo dropped his arm behind Miriam's back where Kemi could not see what he was doing and lifted Miriam's cotton nightdress to caress her naked thighs. Hey! Miriam whispered, moving away. I'm coming soon. Teo called after her. Daddy. What? Finish the story. So Omoteo was standing there, waiting and praying to see the ship. When suddenly his father seized the boy's hand, and lifted him up. There. Rioyo Omoteo screamed excitedly. On his father's shoulders he could. Entire ocean. He watched people running on deck in white shirts and shorts. He wondered how the ship knew which way to drive. Would it get lost? Who would find it then? Omoteo lifted a hand from his father's head to wave at their passengers. Then the church people started singing and he joined in with words he didn't understand but which still sounded good to him. My Bonnie lies over the ocean, please bring back my Bonnie to me. It was then that Omoteo saw something that made him jolt and nearly lose his balance. His father said children couldn't go on ships, but look, there was a child just like him, held up by her mother. It must be the maiden voyage. Was that me? Kemi interrupted. No, Teo laughed. You weren't born yet. Was it Mummy then? Listen, Teo smiled. Omoteo wished with all his heart that the maiden was his friend. That way they could sail the seas together and see all the countries, the pirates, other ships, and the sharks, everything. He would protect her, and they would find the golden fleece for their families. He felt very sad that he wasn't going on their ship, and slumped on his father's shoulders. Barmy. Igba woli minelo? When can I go, Baba? He pleaded, and rubbed his eyes to stop the tears from falling. And the little girl was Mummy. Kemi jumped in to finish the story. And when you were grown up you went on the boat to England, then you came back. And you married Mummy, and we all lived happily ever after. Yes, darling. Teo hugged her tightly. Yes,